Has struck, and we will start to roll. We'll call the May 24th, 2017 work session of the town board to order, and we'll let the minutes reflect that all of the board members are present, a number of members of staff, and tonight a quiet audience. Our first item is the minutes. Would someone like to move approval of the minutes?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, the minutes will stand approved as written. Thank you, Lisa. We have nothing new from a monthly report standpoint. Everything has been received that is supposed to be received, and we're up to a few days prior to the next submission, so we're good there. There's no public hearings this evening. We have no guests this evening, and we'll move right into our action items. And we'll start with the first item, cable TV franchise renewal and future needs. Mr. Reiner.
Thank you. Well, this is just to give you a follow-up from our public hearing that we had on April 5th. And we kept the public participation open until April 28th. We received one written comment via email, and that was primarily in the aspect of cost and the promotional rates and the concerns for that. Saw no significant input from any other sources. We reached out to the Public Service Commission. Their feedback was that they only had one comment in the back 2-year window that we have been looking at. That was resolved within the same day. So at this time, the information that we have on hand, as well as the feedback that we are getting from reviewing some of the draft documents, we're going to be moving forward, if you're comfortable, to go back and work with our consultant, Cohen Law Firm, and proceed forward with drafting the actual franchise.
Sure.
Yep, I'm fine with that. Sounds good. It's really been a lot of time to vet it out and seek responses.
Yeah, so the next step for this will be, of course, the draft, and then we will get into the negotiation process, and then final steps will be to present a draft forward to the public, and then set another public hearing for reviewing the final franchise.
Dave, about how long was the public comment period? It was a couple weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was open on the 5th through the 28th.
Okay.
So that's
3 weeks.
a little, yeah, about 3
Okay.
weeks.
All right, thank you.
And we certainly did some advertising and notification of that on the website. There was information there, opportunity for folks to turn any comments in. We mentioned that as part of the column. We mentioned that in a couple of other forums, so that folks have that ability to go in and comment, good, bad,
Right.
or otherwise overall.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And then, as Dave said, once we work with Dick Horowitz and Cohen Law Firm, then we'll sit down and start that next leg with some negotiations, and then at some point we'll have to have a public hearing. And no idea at least at this point, other than it's probably minimum several months away.
Correct.
So,
Okay.
all right. Other questions for Dave? All right, so that'll complete this cycle for right now. And the next time that we bring it to the agenda, it'll be for review of the document prepared by our ACE internal and external team working together.
Okay, great.
All right.
That's
Very
it.
good. Thanks.
Thank you.
David, thank you.
Have a
Thank you
good
very
evening.
much. Yep, absolutely. Go back and we'll keep all the things moving downstairs, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. We'll move on to mixed-use DGIS, EIS, and I see we've got our friend, Mr. Nersinger, with us, which is always a pleasure.
Indeed.
And my guess is Mr. Valentine is going to yield some of his time to Mr. Nersinger.
Well, his name was so popular on the agenda, I figured.
Gonna give somebody else a chance.
All right, great.
Handouts. So what we're handing out is the remaining project schedule of the secret process as proposed. On May 3rd, we held a public hearing for the draft generic environmental impact statement, where staff presented the document to the board, offered the public the opportunity to submit any comments at the meeting. None were heard. The document was then posted on the website and has been available ever since. A public comment period was then opened at that meeting as well, and the town board determined that the public comment period will close this Friday, May 26th, offering an ample amount of time for the comment period. Since then, since the meeting, there have been no substantive comments submitted to the planning department or to the town board that I'm aware of. So at this time, staff would ask the board if it would be willing or has any further input on the draft document, or if you'd be willing to accept that document in its current form as written as the final document, to be accepted as the final document, which is part of the secret process if no substantive comments are received that warrant any responses. So the proposal, if no comments are received by the close of the comment period, would the board be willing to accept the document and move it into its final form?
Yes.
Yep, I'm fine with that.
I think, we've had some brief conversations about this. So as of, I can speak as of today from the supervisor's office, nothing has come in, and anything obviously that would come into my office would be immediately copied up to your office. So as of 5 p.m. today, there is nothing. And then this comment period does close at the end of business day on Friday, May 26th.
Okay.
So short of, so I think the only caveat that the board would make or want to make is that if something between now and Friday comes in that is something significant, then we'll want to, bring that, have that reviewed by you folks, and then bring that back for review by the board.
And the schedule before you incorporates that scenario into the timeline.
Okay.
What I'm going to pass out now is more of a scenario too, where if no comments, no substantive comments are received, this is how the remaining schedule would look like for this project in terms of the seeker review and potentially adopting the new zoning district.
Okay.
Tony, I would just like to point out one more time that this plan, this mixed-use plan for this area of Penfield was really the result of a resident committee, a mixed-use committee, the 250 committee that both Zach and Mark were very involved in. I think it was a 15-member committee comprising of property owners, area residents, surrounding neighborhood association representatives, and so forth. And they spent maybe 2 years or so going over this document, or creating this document, and then made the recommendation to the town board. So I just think it's worth noting for the record that this is really a result of a lot of hard work from residents of Penfield that made these recommendations to us, and then certainly a lot of credit goes to the town staff, Zach, Mark, and Jim Costello for their efforts in helping the resident committee put together these recommendations that we're looking at today. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good.
So the handout that we just passed out for the scenario 2 schedule, if no comments are submitted by Friday that are considered substantive, the board would then accept the document as a final, in its final form, determine it to be complete, and staff would need direction to prepare the findings statement for this project. It's again part of the secret review process. And then resolution would be prepared for the June 7th legislative meeting, where the board would pass a resolution to accept the final GEIS, and we would provide that document again on our website to involved agencies and post an EMB notice to the DEC.
Right.
Okay. So, board comfortable with moving forward with that schedule? And again, the only caveat will be if something
Yes.
significant comes in. If not, we'll see it on the June 7th for acceptance.
Yes, and then the one last matter that we have, as Councilman Moore had the map up, I was reminded, does the board have any further input or comments about the parcels selected to be rezoned at this time? Again, the committee did make a recommendation to rezone all the identified parcels on that map. The petition was out there for quite a while, and people still have the ability to come in and sign the petition in support of rezoning. We have well over 50% of the parcels and acreage involved in this area, making up the district, the new district. Just asked if there are any other concerns or questions at this time.
No, I certainly defer and understand the committee's determination as to the scope of the property area.
Okay.
So I'm fine with it.
And then staff will start a boundary description of that. Obviously, we'll have to be part of the record for the rezoning is to rezone those areas. So we'll do a boundary description around that area, and then the creation of the mixed use zoning district, and we'll work with Horowitz on that, and as well as getting the ordinance adopted and all those next steps. So just kind of confirming that as we get into that next phase of starting to finalize the pieces and parts.
Okay, all right, good. That sounds good and appropriate. So to move forward with that, I think what would be helpful, for the board, if you could give us, out of the 65 parcels, if you will, 40 of them have, signed the petition, resulting in acreage of, my good straight person? Oh, look at that. Look at that. Thank you. Ask and I shall
Pass
receive.
out a map
All
that
right.
reflects that.
What's
Perfect.
your plan?
Always prepared.
Very good. All right, so as we have
The
this,
green
if you
parcels
would give us...
indicated on the map show properties that have signed the petition in support of rezoning. The blue are those that have not responded, and we're awaiting signatures.
Okay.
So you either have someone has signed or they've not responded.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, this petition has been out there for several months, if not more than a year.
Yeah, I'm prepared to move forward.
All right, that's great. From an area standpoint, without having the meets and bounds, but as I take a look at it, one might say that we're probably close to 3/4 of the land area for that, have signed off in support of the new district.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Board, additional questions for Zach or Mark on next steps?
No, great job, Rick.
Thank
All
you.
right. Yep, great job, Zach.
all I have.
Let's get this this in and on the agenda for the 7th, and we'll be ready to take the next step.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Let's move on to drainage and sidewalk projects for kind of a update, overview, and general information.
Mr. Supervisor, just as kind of we do annually, to kind of talk about the drainage projects we have in process, other ones that we're looking forward to, as well as sidewalks. I did bring, and I can tip it towards the board since we don't have audience members at the moment. Dave can get that downstairs. This is the map we've brought to Watershed, and Paul is very familiar with that. We've tried to classify, or at least map the areas we've cleaned each year. We're trying to get on more of a regular basis of cleaning them, tracking what years we have done them. So the items highlighted, I highlighted in green, are areas that either are already in progress this year, as far as working off Atlantic Avenue. The DPW has already started out cleaning this piece. They're finishing 4 Mile Creek, which they started last year. They've already been down to Panorama, working on some erosion problems down there. And then we have permits for doing behind Heathwood. They've already cleaned by the YMCA out of the Country Club East Pond. And then we have some permits for Salt Road already. So we pretty much have the DPW booked up through fall already with just the projects we have. We do have an extensive list, and I didn't highlight all of them, but on this map they're kind of in an orange, color of areas we've had requested. We're going to work on running those through the watershed committee. We have a tour coming up. We'll look at some of those, and as well as I'd like to get out with staff and walk all of them, see what, if any, additional blockages there are after the windstorms we've had from early spring, late winter, as well as the rain and everything else. So we typically like to get in a schedule where we get the projects in, get the permits going. They often take about a year to get the permits, so then this time next year we'll have the permits in hand and can work with the DPW to have them out onto the next round and keeping them moving. So they've knocked off several already this year. We do have additional projects going on, some riprap projects for some erosion areas, highlighted those as well. But just looking to continue what we've done so far, reach those areas we may not have reached in a number of years. Some of the areas we worked down on along 441, I think the reports from the neighbors, we were back in there in the 1940s or 50s. So we're hoping that we can get around more regularly than that. Unfortunately, we don't make it around every 5 years, but we're also working with the DPW to mow. The commission ditch was a major effort this board worked through several years ago, is to have them mow along the edges of that, keep that open so the trees don't grow right back in. If a tree does fall, it's easy enough for them to track in, pluck out 1 or 2 trees if there is a blockage, and then go on the way, rather than going into an older area. It's just you got to basically clear cut your way in, get a side open, do the work. So the cleaning of the ditch is usually the minor part. The getting access and in through that area is more the major piece. So having them do once or twice a year, we're not looking to manicure it, but just enough to knock down the seedlings or the saplings that are coming up for the roadside mow. They've been doing a nice job of that as well.
So a question that Linda was asking of me earlier is that as a result of the windstorm, I mean, we've done a lot of work where we're aware that trees have fallen or anything like that. Is there any area, any hot spot that we haven't been able to get to yet that's on our list?
I haven't heard directly of any particular area. I know we've already had ones on our list, and I don't think the windstorm has made it better in some of those spots, and we'll work on those if there is an immediate blockage and DPW could get to it. We did have some that were off the road, and they've kind of plucked some of those out already. But I don't know of anything, and maybe DPW does, if there was any excessive amount of trees that have blocked up drainage areas. We've had an especially wet spring, as we're all aware, so maybe the neighbors haven't been back in those areas yet, and it's wet because of that. But typically then we'll get calls from people saying, hey, something's down, and this is now blocked, and if you're not aware of it. But we will be out as staff, and as well as the watershed committee, walking these drainage ways and looking at areas and hopefully keep this momentum going and keep the drainage as a top priority.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next item is sidewalks. That was the map over here. So the items in green is what we've installed so far this year. I do have a handout sheet, basically summaries and our costs for this year. And those sidewalks are already in. Mike O'Connor was kind of leading that up and did a great job working with Heinz Concrete. We were the first town out of the box this year to get sidewalks installed. So if you've been up and down Route 250 on the west side, south of Wayland, those are in and installed. The portion along Empire Boulevard near Abraham Lincoln Park in the south was installed, as well as some repairs that the DPW was looking for on Clark Road were done as well. So concrete costs have gone up, labor costs have gone up. We were able to leverage, basically we didn't do sidewalks last year, so we rolled over last year's sidewalk money. We had the money from this year, as well as some CDBG grant money, but those 3 projects have taken us through our budget for this year. We had originally thought or looked at doing Atlantic Avenue. Still working with the supervisor and see if there's other spots in the budget we can possibly put that in, so that's kind of down on the secondary list is the piece for that. The next piece we have CDBG money for is the Empire Boulevard, the lower piece in blue over here. That number is for that whole section, but I think we may break that up. We met recently with the state DOT. They're looking to do some improvements on Empire Boulevard. Obviously, with all the rains we've seen, that lower pull-off area is underwater right now, so that may change some of our design plans. We originally had planned on some helical coil boardwalk areas down in there, so we may shorten that piece up, and then we're obviously still looking to do a connection at the YMCA. They contributed some funds towards that. When they put the traffic light in and the pet indicators, we'd like to complete that piece as well. So that's kind of what initially we're targeting towards next year. We do have other locations we've looked at. We've had requests for sidewalks on 5 Mile Line going north from Rothfuss Park. We've had some requests on Hatch Road coming down. But I'm just kind of looking ahead as what we've already kind of got in the queue. The county grant money is one, you don't use it, you lose it. So, even if we can do the lower piece down by the park, we did apply for some additional funding this year to do some improvements at the park, and we're looking to, enhance that park down there a little bit with that. But just going into 2018, currently our budget is $50,000, 40 is for new construction, and 10 is for repairs. That doesn't leave us a whole lot of wiggle room, and I was looking at the budget numbers, we're over that, and we always project over based on getting easements and design and everything else. That I'd rather have more things in the queue, and then if something falls off, we've got something to back it up.
And that's a great way to do it, Mark. We've done a nice job of, both on the drainage side, staying ahead with paperwork going into DEC to get permits, and for your planning and work here, so that, like you say, if something just doesn't come as quick as we might think, we got some fallback positions, and so that's been a great job by you and your team.
Where is the end, the light at the end of the tunnel on Empire Boulevard? I mean, I feel as if we've been talking about this for 6-7 years, and I'm just curious to know. I know we've been getting the grant, but at some point, either we're going to be finished.
If we do the entire piece that's in the blue, that would finish off what's in Penfield. There is a boardwalk section that is going to be quite costly. The on-the-ground sidewalk, or what you would understand as normal sidewalk, down in this piece, I think that's doable. We may look at some other grants for that boardwalk area, but I said as the state is looking at possibly redoing, call it a culvert, but it's a bridge down there right past Basil's. They're looking at replacing that bridge somewhere in the near future. There is a portion to hang sidewalks on it. I'd like to kind of avoid that, so we may have a few gap years until the state comes along, and I think they were looking at a 2018, 2019 project for that. But if they're going to come through there, they were looking at doing some possibly green infrastructure in that lower area. So again, I think we may make kind of segments, kind of what we do with Panorama Trail. We kind of worked our way down the road. I kind of propose to leave that middle section right between Basil's and the Oak Orchard Canoe open for the short term. I mean, it's a great connection. It would be great to have those connected together. But while the state's figuring out what they're doing, if they're replacing that bridge, I hate to put something in the ground or put some infrastructure in and then have it either not fit their design, be damaged. So I think if we do the lower piece, coming from the park up towards Oak Orchard, kind of stop there, and then we may wait a year or two, see what the state's doing on their piece, and then look to fill in that last gap. Once we fill in that last gap, I believe we have sidewalks from what would be the Irondequoit town line to the Webster town line. So that quarter would be pretty much complete at that point.
Okay.
So the cost for the remaining portion is $155,000? Is that?
Yeah, and then there's still a question mark in there in that middle piece, so that could be,
So we're still looking at,
it could be a couple years.
I was going to say 4
I
to
see.
5 years realistically before we can finish that, right?
And that's why I say we're always looking for grants, and we supplemented it. We have $34,000 in the CDBG grant that'll help support that. I know Jim Costello worked, a couple years ago, was looking at some grants for boardwalks along that area. I think we can look at something similar. So we're trying to, leverage, the town dollars, the tax dollars, along with grants to do some work in that area. But as the costs go up and cost of concrete, labor, and everything else goes up, working against the budget, we kind of just try to take little chunks here and there and spread some of that around the town.
So just to switch gears for a moment, because you mentioned $10,000 a year is what we've been budgeting now for maintenance. Give me an idea of how how can you stretch that 10,000? Like, what kind of linear feet are you fixing, or are you just fixing some intersections, or do
Yeah,
you think 10,000 is sufficient enough to kind of repair the current problems of existing sidewalks?
And I think a lot of the stuff, and I know you asked about 5 Mile Line, I did
Right.
go out and walk that on Monday. I mean, there's certain things we can go out, there's, I did notice a tripping hazard in that area, that's something the DPW can go out and mill an edge. Not needed for a whole replacement of sidewalks, there were some cracked sections out there, those they can go out there and caulk those, so wholly there was near Shadow Vale and Country Lane, thank you. There were some spots in there that probably have a couple of slabs need to be adjusted. Those were, had settled or were out of normal compliance. But most of our sidewalks, I mean, there are older sections, stuff here and there, but I think, with either caulking some joints, going along and milling some edges and the trip hazards and everything else, we can definitely extend the life out of those. Wholly through the town, I think our sidewalks are in decent shape. As you get trees by the road, that's where more we see roots kind of heave up the section, and you need to replace a piece here or there. But if we can kind of keep, milling away at those pieces and keep it down. This year, Clark Road, had a section that had heaved up, and there were some settlement issues in other spots that took the majority of our budget there. We do have sidewalk districts, so that's a different pot of money. So the people that pay into the intensified sidewalk district, there is separate money for that. Basically,
Right.
they're paying to have their own repairs. We'll be working later this summer with the DPW and Heinz Concrete to come back and do some repairs. They kind of did ours. They were here for 2 weeks. They had to go on to another community, but probably July, August, they'll be back, and we'll do other repairs in other sections.
So it sounds, I'm sorry, it sounds as if that there are quick fixes, I guess, that DPW can
Yep,
do
I think
on
there's
problem
in-house-
sidewalk areas that don't necessarily eat into that maintenance.
If we can
budget.
do it with our own labor and our own equipment,
Very good.
I think we can extend the life of a lot of our sidewalks than a full removal and replace, then obviously.
That makes sense.
You get into bigger costs and bigger dollars.
So to give the board an idea, Mark, what's the current standard for linear foot of sidewalk?
Currently this year, we are paying $38.50 for sidewalk. But that is just concrete, 5 feet wide, 1 foot long. So basically you're 40 feet every piece, but that doesn't include, the costs jump up from there once you get into driveway repairs, you got topsoil and
Right.
seed, you gotta do fill, you gotta do some grading. Once you cut through a driveway, you gotta taper it back. Especially going along 250, we had a lot of driveways as you're trying to work with grades. That doesn't include storm work that's around it. So that's the pure cost for concrete. Once you get all the ancillary stuff and everything else around it, I think this year we're almost, double that in some spots. So $60 a foot once you add in everything else. So the budget goes quickly. I think, we've done some, some good infill spots. And I think this year, as Councilman Moore shared, he's already seen people walking on spots and sections, and I think our residents are out there using it and finding it beneficial. We continue to get requests and people that want it.
All right. Other questions on the sidewalk piece?
I know that, Tony, you've done a great job, with the relationship with the county and certainly securing that grant through the county. Since the program still exists and, state programs go and ebb and flow, and you never know how long they're going to be around, but the program is very successful, it's still there, so it makes sense to continue to work on the Empire Boulevard program. If for some reason a year comes up or 2 years in a row that we don't receive any money through that grant, it may make sense to move Empire Boulevard further down the priority list, bump some other town priorities up, and utilize that funding to maybe knock off some of the other town projects that are more manageable under a $50,000 a year budget. And because Empire Boulevard, now you have water up on the road, for crying out loud. State DOT may have to go in and do something drastic over the next 2 to 3 years that's going to wipe out any potential sidewalk. So if in the event, I wouldn't want to, pull away from that now because the grant has been very productive. But if for some reason that grant starts to disappear or altogether, then I would recommend maybe we look at utilizing those funds and pulling back from Empire Boulevard for a year or two, so.
And the one reason we focused on Empire, there are specific areas on census blocks that the grant is only utilized for, so it's...
And that's why I
Just for
understand the value of the
just for the
grant.
public is, you know, that's
Yeah.
one area that you can get the grant funding for, and doing some improvements is based on census data. That's one of
Because
the
none of
few
the-
areas that we have. Other areas of town, that doesn't fall under that.
And I
So it's
understand
not-
that, so that's why we're still, receiving the grant.
Yep,
and it
and
makes
that's just a
sense to use it.
clarification for the public, is
Very
why
good.
is that one area getting, so much interest is, if we can get funding for it, and we're trying to take advantage of the funding that's out there and, maximize, the benefit to our residents if we can get funding for that area, which unfortunately we can't for 250 and Atlantic, and those are outside those census blocks.
So right now, you can walk from Basil's all the way up to the Webster Town line on sidewalks
Yes.
today. So completing that section this year was a big help.
Right.
To do that and tie all that together between
Especially-
South Point and,
Abraham Lincoln Park right there,
Abraham Lincoln.
means, the residents trying to get to the park and, bring their kids there, especially from, the houses or apartments or residential nearby.
right? All right, if no other questions for Mark on what I'll call drainage or sidewalk, then we'll move on to Allen's Creek erosion. And while this does fall under the drainage component, what I had suggested to Mark that we break it out, because it is a pretty unique project, and certainly one that's pretty significant in cost. And so just thought it was probably good to kind of break it out as its own special project. So Mark, if you want to kind of give us the latest and greatest where we are with that
And I see on
today.
the map, I kind of highlighted Allen's Creek is in the pink, kind of in that lower corner. As this board knows, we did have some erosion down there last year. We had a bank slide that blocked off a portion of the stream. Worked with DEC to get that remediated. But basically, that was a Band-Aid of what is a bigger issue situation down there. We've already had a couple of trees come down this year, so just looking to see where this board is at. Obviously, we're going to have to expend some cost to do a final design down there. We've done some studies. We've had the studies completed. We've shared those before. Obviously, we have to get into a final design permitting process with the DEC. We can also look at, and there is some, has been some grant funding out there, but those are matching grants. So I want to make sure the board is, supportive of moving ahead with the project. Obviously, if we're going in for matching grants and everything else that, ties us to some matching cost, whether that's in-kind labor or whatnot, each one's a little bit different, but just wanted to bring it back. We've talked about it in the past, and just as we're coming up to budget season and everything else, as we're looking at different things, as I, submit my budget and everything else, just kind of want to make the board aware that, we may incur in some additional costs, one on the design side, and then, looking future is on the construction end of things.
Where are we in conversations with our neighboring towns?
The supervisor and I have met with Brighton. They have some erosion on their end down in Corbett's Glen in that area. They may be looking to do some grant applications as well, and would be glad to partner with them on that. Was most recently down at Allen's Creek Valley looking at some drainage issues on their own private property, but looking for access points, opportunities on how do we get back into there. That's going to be one of our big challenges is the homes down in the boroughs and stuff are older homes. They have mature landscaping. They're fairly close together. We're talking about larger rocks and putting in weirs and J-hooks and other stuff into the stream channel. Obviously, we need to get permits from Army Corps and DEC for that, but you got to get large equipment in there as well. So, see, Mike O'Connor and myself were just out the other day over at Linden Tech, looking at one where the tree came down, but two kind of scoping out, and we'll have to negotiate some easements, from them, and is there an access to come in from that end to get stuff in there? But, we're looking at natural, let's say the Benway weirs and the J-hooks to create, more of a natural stream. We're not looking to armor it from one end to the other, but use natural forms, and I'm not an expert in that end of it, and that's why we, have been working with Barton and Judas in the past and had studies done by them on it, but obviously more work to be done.
Is there a sense of urgency or timeliness on any of the?
Obviously, the neighbors, I mean, we do get contacted by them. They are getting erosion down there. It is scouring along their edge. Last year, we had a major slide that, an entire hillside slid down in the back. We were able to kind of, I say Band-Aid that, but, push stuff around in the trees. But, there was a major slide last year that blocked the entire stream. The stream then bypassed and was scouring up into people's backyards where it wasn't before. And as we know, last summer was a pretty dry summer. So far this year, I say we've had a couple of
It's not
trees
dry.
down. It's not dry this year. We've had a
Precipitation.
couple of trees come down this year. Knock on wood, we haven't had a major slide yet, but just trying to be ahead of it. It's not going to be easy to get into these spots, and it's going to take time to work with the neighbors. We're going to have neighborhood meetings, talk with them. Each one's got a little bit something different down there. There's going to be some give and take on their end of how this all plays out. How do we get access? Where do we have staging areas? So it's just going to be a long lead time to get up to that, to get the permits and everything else. So again, just trying to be proactive before we end up behind the 8 ball on something.
And I know it's almost impossible to compare last year's season with this year so far because of the amount of rainfall, but have you been able to determine any kind of new challenges that have come up downstream because of some of the erosion through that corridor? I mean, is there anything that you can point to saying because of this that happened last year, this is not draining as well as it should be this year? I know, again, the water levels are different, but anything that you can
I mean,
determine?
I think a lot of the upstream areas, older development of Brighton and other communities that kind of predate stormwater ponds. So I think as our new developments go in, we put a pond which helps control the amount of flow that comes out. So the quantity that comes out or the rate it comes out. Some of those older developed communities don't have any ponds in their communities. The rain hits, it just comes off quick. Once it comes off quick, it hits these streams and you get the flash of water that comes down through there. So I don't think we've seen as much of a flooding issue, but just the velocity that comes through, it comes through quickly, it's erosive, it starts scouring into the banks and everything else. So we're looking to put these weirs in place to focus the stream back to the middle. So it hasn't been as much of, other than the one slide, a blockage or a limit to where the water goes. On a normal day, it was a nice trickling little stream down there, even just recently with all the rain we've had. It's just when we get those heavy rains, it just hits that stream very quickly and becomes erosive very quickly. So we're just trying to put those elements into place to, steer the stream back to the middle rather than it starts to wander and then bouncing off, the embankments, and that's when it starts undercutting slopes and.
Well, we've also had some issues because it does have impact on water quality.
It does, and that's
That's
a
an
lot of
element that DEC, Health Department, Stormwater Management Committee, and things are looking at as well as
And all
the other.
that sediment then goes into Rondequoit Creek, which then comes out into Rondequoit Bay, and so, that's adding to the silting of Rondequoit Bay, and
So
there's
that
issues there as well.
My recommendation, to the board is that, this has been an ongoing item. We did invest with Barton Judas to prepare the preliminary plans. They've been in a couple of times. I think we're at a point that my recommendation to the board would be that this is our next major water course that we need to invest some time and money in. And my recommendation would be to have Mark, get an updated, the information from Barton Judas for the final design, and kind of refresh those options that we have, because there were multiple options for that. But I think it's important that as we do that, one of the things that we should be thinking about is, if we can start some this year with the 2017 budget, and then as we head into 2018, that we're kind of underway now, putting that budget together, if there's any special considerations that we want to do for that. And I think it would be good, and we've chatted a little bit about it at the watershed management, but certainly would be, I would welcome their thoughts and recommendations back to us.
And that's on our upcoming tour, is to bring the members down there and show them the slide that happened last year, so they can see it, firsthand and get their take on it as well.
So we've got Willow Pond essentially behind us, and I think this is kind of that next big project that's hanging out there that we've got to, start. And as Mark said, it's probably a multi-year, based on what we tackle, overall costs and things like that. And I know that as recent as last week, Mark and I, a couple of folks from DPW were talking about, there is an opportunity with the Windsor Bridge subdivision for us to obtain some rocks and boulders that we'll need for, potential riprapping. And one of the things that we had talked about is having those stockpiled over at Rofus along the north borderline. And so it's out of the way of any play, and gives us the opportunity to stockpile that so that when we need them, we're not going out and buying rock, at, thousands of dollars, to help armor or put in some of the work that I think that Mark is seeing and that Department of Justice is recommending. So at least it gives us an opportunity to do that. So that's something as recent as last week that we started to talk about.
Sounds good.
So,
Okay.
all right, so
Okay.
Mark,
Like I said, I did reach out to Barton Judas. I didn't get a cost back from them yet, and I'm sure they're interested in which option, and I'll sit down with them and kind of work through that. But I'll look to bring that back to the board at a future work
be
session.
great.
But just as part of our drainage discussion, thought it was kind of good to bring that up and roll that into the conversation.
I think that's good, and we'll, Lisa, will show this as a held item because I think we should be looking to bring it back, sooner rather than later. Okay, very good. Any further discussion on that matter? Okay, then let's move on to pond treatment pilot program, kind of a snapshot of what took place in 2016 and some recommendations that I know Watershed Management has recently talked about.
So basically I handed out 3 sheets. The top sheet is the quote. ATIP was the group we worked with last year. We got 3 quotes from different groups. Looking at doing some pilot treatment of lilies, doing the muck away, looking at extending the life of our ponds using these muck pellets that go out there and eat up the bottom before you have to go out there and dredge it, as well as doing some minimal algicide treatment, just to kind of handle the excessive growth as we kill off the lilies and everything else. So the last sheet you have, we asked them for a 3-year projection of what the costs may be. That was the 3-year projection they showed in 16, 17, and 18. We did go out late in the fall with the, actually it wasn't the fall, just the spring. Went out with the Watershed group. We've already did 1 tour with the group. Went back and looked at it. ATIP asked if we wanted them to come along. Thought that was a good idea. As we stood with the group and talked about the items and what may be new, they came back with the top sheet as a revised quote on that. Some of the numbers have tweaked a little bit as the lilies were killed off in some of the ponds last year. Now you've got the bio product of that kind of dropped in the pond, so that changed a little bit of the price for the algicide to make sure that you don't move one problem to the next. You take care of the lily problem and then it moves into an algicide problem on that. As far as the muck away products and everything else, I think we're going to look, and one of our newest Watershed members, he's been doing some research on that. He sent us some stuff, and I think there's some areas we can potentially get some better prices on. So work with the DPW and the Parks Department. They come as like a hockey puck. They're non-toxic. So last year we had the Parks Department went out and dispersed them in the ponds. I'd like to continue doing that, just see if it starts to eat this muck away and save, the cost it took to dredge Glenbrook Pond and some of these other spots in the past. If we can do it with microbes eating the muck in lieu of physically pumping and dredging it down, I think it's worth extending with that. And then the other is to kind of do some treatments. The second sheet shows a more intense treatment of Glenbrook Pond. So that's the major change in the number, is doing a season-long treatment of algicide. We haven't run that past the Watershed Committee. I have a little concern of possibly the precedent that sets. The board and the committee all along has said, we're worried about the functionality of the pond. If it has excessive growth during certain things and it's blocking it up, we're looking at that. If it, you know, the muck and the depth of everything else to keep it functional, but I don't think it's the town board or the town's plan is to, you know, take care of the full aesthetic to have a crystal clear pond and everything else. It's the town's function to make sure that it flows, it handles in storms, and
It's not to make it look like the Gulf of Mexico.
so my initial push to the board or request is whether the board is okay with going ahead or continue with this pilot program, seeing how the muckaway works, see if it starts to eat it down in one season. It's kind of hard to see that. It was easy to see the lily growth die off. We could see that. We could see the, you know, the overall growth in the ponds went down. That part worked great. I think the muckaway takes a little longer to see the, you know, what it's actually doing. The watershed group and as Paula can attest, you know, did take a look at it and was supportive of, you know, continuing the pilot program for another year, see how that works. I'm a little hesitant on doing a full season of algaecide treatment and, you know, making it a pristine pond area. You know, we're worried about the functionality of it and not.
Certainly would agree with that observation, Mark.
I would agree, and I think the pilot project is smart, not only, you know, fiscally and just logically, but it's resident friendly too. It's easy to explain to residents who are near the ponds, and we have our newest member of the committee as a resident, to explain to his neighbors, as well as other pond inhabitants around, residents around the pond, as to, you know, why we're proceeding in this way. I think it's
Yeah, I mean, we all know the cost of dredging, and we've done that, and the pumping, and there's times that you have to do that, and that's the approach. But I think looking at other options, that there's a cost to anything you do, but, you know, the cost of this, if that it can extend the life of the pond or not need to dredge it for, you know, decades.
minimal disturbance to
Yeah.
the pond and to those who live around it as well.
Yeah, so we have sent out some notes, and there is a lead time on the obtaining the permits. So we have sent out some letters to people, you know, letting them know that we've made application for some of these permits and everything else. That was a little preemptive, but just knowing that there's an excessive lead time to that. If this wasn't supported, then obviously that just wouldn't happen. But so if there are people out there that got letters, that does talk about some of the treatments we're looking at. That's just a requirement of DEC to send that out, tell people, you know, what the chemical is. The ponds are required to be blocked and everything else, so it's just a preventative thing. But they do seal a pond off. You want to have as much retention time for the treatment in the pond, and then once that's, you know, expired, you time it so it's not during a rainy time, then, you know, the water flows down. So just kind of want to share that if anybody had questions or wanted to receive a letter about the stuff, that
Good with moving forward?
Very good.
And
so put a resolution in for that to
resolution in for
authorize
that,
that.
that would be great, Mark. We'll do that for
Okay.
the 7th of June. Okay? And thank you to yourself and your staff. Also, thank you to the watershed. You know, we've got a great group. The new member that was added has been consistently at all the meetings, and there's no question he's jumped in and has been a big help and a big asset to that. So we're fortunate that that group vets a lot of this out ahead of time and helps work with staff. So a key.
It's been a very active group. I say we've taken, I mean, normally we do a once a year tour. I think in the past year we've gone out 3 times just while we're doing this pilot pond programs as well as on their own, but to look at it and to monitor it. You know, the group has been very active. We've gone out several times as a group to look at it, discuss it, review it, so they have been on top of it and, you know, been above and beyond our standard meetings just to, you know, to monitor this and make sure that it's worthwhile.
Okay, excellent. Thanks again.
Very good.
And then one last question on that. I mean, who from your team is going to be your certified diver? Have you identified anybody? I mean, you've got Zach, you've got Sarah, you've got Mike up there. You
Great
guys
long-
strong?
We'll pull straws and see
Okay,
who's going down.
very good. So
Big
good on it.
bamboo, use bamboo.
Get a long straw.
Cheaper.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to the last item under action items, Vision Dodge additional parking, 920 Panorama Trail.
This was an item that was in our held item for a while. I had reached out a while ago to the applicant, hadn't heard anything. I reached out to them most recently, it's a Friday. I did get a call today. They said they are still working on responding. This board last left it that they wanted responses to the Conservation Board memo with concerns about the slope and what the condition of that was, how it was left, as well as concerns about the parking near the top of the edge, something reduced from that. They said they're still working on that. They asked, to be tabled to a future meeting. The board can, take action to take it off as a held item, and when and if they come back, we can add it as a new item or however you want to handle it. But I know it's just kind of been hanging out there for a while, and we're looking to.
Why don't we do that?
We have some outstanding issues with the code enforcement, everything else.
So that was going to be my next question, was what do we have outstanding? So we have some things from code enforcement. So this is the recommendation that I put on the table for the board's consideration. We have our next work session is going to be on June 14th. They have a choice of coming in and addressing, or we reissue the order to get things cleaned up, period. And then the discussion point that is on the table, from my perspective, is off the table. Bring it back to the natural, the way it was, and no further considerations for any expansion in that area. That would be the reason I'd recommend we table it just for that next period of time.
I would support that. We certainly want to hear responses to the Conservation Board's concern, and those are important, but code violations and working through those or lack thereof, I think, takes priority, and I would certainly not even consider their responses to the Conservation Board memo until we have a resolution of the code issues.
Absolutely.
So,
I will pass that along to them and
thank you.
invite them to your work session on the 14th.
Absolutely, that'd be great. And if they elect to either not show or withdraw or whatever, then the next step takes place.
Okay.
Okay, very good. That runs us through action items. There are no informational items tonight, and seeing no further business to come before the board, the May 24th, 2017 work session will stand adjourned at 7:52 p.m. Thank you, board, staff, PCTV.